the logic industry for some 18 years. And as I went and visited many of my old friends today, they said, how could you, who've been in the programmable logic industry for 18 years, now all of a sudden surface at MIPS as a microprocessor supplier? And to them, I had to remind them a little bit about my background. And that is, some 20 odd years ago, when I was a graduate student, I did my graduate work at Stanford University. I did my graduate work in electrical engineering and in processor architecture under a very famous professor, a gentleman by the name of John Hennessy. John Hennessy, as many of you know, was the founder of MIPS. And all of the architectural work that I did as a graduate student for him was on the MIPS architecture. So for me, joining MIPS is very much coming full circle throughout the career. And I had a great opportunity to sit and talk with John Hennessy about a week and a half ago. As many of you know, he went from being the head of the computer systems lab at Stanford and is currently the president of Stanford University. When he found out I had taken over the MIPS job, he wanted to come and talk to me. I was wondering what he wanted to talk about. In fact, I was kind of wondering whether he would ask me what grade I got in his classes. So I went back and tried to look for my old transcripts. I couldn't find them, and for the life of me, I couldn't remember what grade I got. Maybe you just have selective memory at times. I finally said if he was going to ask me my grade, I was simply going to tell him, well, I guess it was good enough to get my diploma. And it seemed to work. I just want all you to know that John is doing very, very well. He is keeping a very close eye on MIPS because it is his baby. I was quite amazed, given the myriad of things that he is involved in, how close he continues to stay to microprocessor architectures and how close he stays to what is happening in the electronics industry. And he somewhat does that because he now also sits on the board of Google, another company with very strong Stanford connections. Let me tell you a little bit about MIPS, because I believe it is a time to reintroduce MIPS to many people. We all know about the beginnings of MIPS, and we all know about its growth in the early days, but many people may not know what's going on with the company now. Well, I'm happy to report that the company is doing well. Last quarter, the company shipped out through its licensees, both architecture and core licensees, 126 million chips into the industry that have MIPS processors on board. And we announced in January that our first calendar quarter, which we just completed, would be yet another record. So that is a run rate of over 500 million units of MIPS-based semiconductors out in the marketplace today. An absolute record. You all have MIPS microprocessors in your homes today. You may not know, but roughly 2/3 of all of the digital TVs, the set-top boxes, the digital cameras, and the DVD and Blu-ray players that we all use in our living rooms and in our bedrooms for our entertainment are powered by the MIPS microprocessor. We are the #1 player in the digital home. And companies, fast-growing, very successful companies, such as Broadcom, PMC Sierra, Zoran, M-Star, SunPlus, Cavium Networks, NetLogic, and virtually every company in Israel and most of the ones in Taiwan that I know of, all utilize the MIPS microprocessor. The basic function of what MIPS does is have a group of architecture technologists that build the most advanced processors out in the industry today for embedded applications, and then license them to semiconductor companies who can then build the most advanced chips. By doing that, they do not have to invest in developing their own processor. Instead, they can work on building the most successful system-on-chip products that are available out in the industry today. That is a trend that I believe will continue going into the future because chips are becoming more and more complex. And the more that they can outsource the processor development, the lower cost of that chip it will be, and the greater ecosystem leverage they can provide. Because a processor is not simply another commodity piece of IP that you can interchange between different vendors. The processor is arguably the most important part of every advanced chip out there today. And when a company makes a processor decision, they're making a decision that impacts all of the software that sits on these different semiconductor devices. And MIPS, being the #2 processor supplier to semiconductor companies, has that necessary ecosystem of software, of operating systems, of stacks, and of expertise in the world to be able to use it. Okay. Let me very briefly describe for you what the strategy of MIPS will be going forward. #1 is to continue the very strong #1 presence we have in digital consumer. So that has continued to be the primary processor for all of the electronics that make our lives so enjoyable. And what is great is that there's a tremendous amount of innovation in that area. Have any of you seen the new digital TVs out there? LCD TVs, very, very thin screen TVs, and now 3D televisions? How many of you saw Avatar? Well, imagine seeing more and more programs like that in your home. What I'm excited about there is there's innovation. There's a reason to upgrade. There's a reason to go and to buy additional flat panels for the home. And that all means good business for us and for other suppliers in that market. In set-top boxes, they are now adding internet connectivity to the basic set-top box. That was only bringing in television programs before. So now you can see Yahoo Finance or YouTube, or for the younger crowd, Facebook and Twitter, MySpace, right on your television. Again, innovation. And digital cameras, well, it used to be that you would take a picture and then you would get it developed and it would sit in your desk drawer. Now, I go to a party, people are out there with their digital cameras, and before I go home, all the pictures are up on Facebook. It can sometimes be embarrassing. But that means continued innovation. So we believe that's a strong area, a growing area. We want to continue our dominating presence in that. The second strategy is to leverage the strong presence and the strong growth that MIPS is having in the networking market. I don't know if you all have noticed, but you can see the trend of MIPS processors broadly replacing PowerPC in the core of the network across each one of the top 10 networking companies. How will you all see this? You will see this because of the growth of MIPS architectural licensees like Cavium Networks or NetLogic, two of the fastest growing semiconductor companies today who base their chips predominantly on MIPS processors, and maybe the not so startling success of Freescale, because they are basically replacing all of those chips in the core of the network. And that means the core of the network is migrating from PowerPC to MIPS. And I would contend today that the most successful companies in networking are utilizing the MIPS microprocessor. And with that continuing to be a greater presence in the core of the network, the networking companies themselves are looking at MIPS cores to power their own chips. And we are responding by building cores, processor cores, very specifically targeted to high-end networking applications.